Good evening and welcome to the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I now call this meeting to order. Our board clerk, Julie Mitchell, will now take roll for this evening.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I will call into everybody who's present this evening. Sal Camarada, Boshana Etten, Chris Johnson, Mike Roselli, Stephen Crutchfield, Sean McAndrew, Andy Coe, Jeff Moncrief, and Ken George.
Thank you. The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. Our role is to function as citizen advisors to the Town Council, who will make the final decision on all rezoning activity. Our citizen opinions based on the Cary Community Plan document play a very important role in advising our town leadership. While this is a public meeting, it is not a public hearing. There is no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. If you do have comments about any of the items discussed, we encourage you to reach out to the staff by email or phone. You may reach out to board members through email. You may also contact the council directly through email or during any of the public speaks out portion of regularly scheduled town council meetings. These board meetings may be streamed live on the Town of Cary website and will be posted to YouTube. All past planning and zoning board meetings are available to view on YouTube. First, to start off this, we will be adopting the agenda. Everybody should have had time to take a look at it. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next item would be the approval of the regular meeting minutes. Again, everyone has had a chance to read the minutes online, and this would be from the January 22nd session. If there's no request for changes, would someone make a motion to approve the January 22nd meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We only have one case for tonight. It's 23 REZ 11, 2500 Piney Plains rezoning. Jessica Haba, planner, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff and of the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, board. Thank you for having me. As mentioned, I'm Jessica Haba. I've been with the Planning Department 3 years now, and this is my first case for the Planning and Zoning Board. So the case to be heard tonight is 23 REZ 11. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.08 acres located at 2500 Piney Plains Road, north of the intersection of Piney Plains and Tryon Road. The subject property is a single residential parcel with an existing detached dwelling. It is surrounded by residential lots of varying size and type. For context, this site is located just north of Tryon Road and about a mile southwest of the Crossroads Shopping Center. There is also a planned NCDOT interchange project near the top of the slide, marked here with the blue arrow. This interchange would include entrance and exit ramps to Piney Plains Road near the current intersection of Piney Plains and Dillard Drive. This NCDOT project is projected to impact traffic flow in the area. According to Cary's maps, there are no stream buffers impacting the site. If the rezoning is approved, a more detailed assessment of the site's natural features will be required at the time of development plan review. Piney Plains Road is currently a 5-lane thoroughfare that is built out consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan's future roadway widths map. This includes existing sidewalk along the property's frontage. Staff is currently assessing corridor improvements along this road, and final recommendations will take the NCDOT interchange project to the north into account. According to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, there are no greenways or parks proposed within or adjacent to the site. However, the Spite Branch Greenway and the Macedonia Lake Loop Trails, which are marked with the green line, are located east of the site, with access to the trail approximately a third of a mile away. The site is currently zoned Residential 40 or R40. The R40 district primarily accommodates large lot residential uses with a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet or just under 1 acre. Some civic, open space, and recreational uses are also permitted. Development under this zoning district in Cary is relatively uncommon given the low density permitted in R40. The applicant proposes to rezone the site to Transitional Residential Conditional Use, or TRCU. This district accommodates a wider variety of residential types with smaller required lot sizes and a maximum density of 6 units per acre. There are 2 zoning conditions being offered by the applicant. The first is to limit uses to detached dwellings and townhouses. This would allow the applicant to develop the site either entirely as one of these housing types alone or a mixed residential development with both housing types. The second condition is that the proposed development will be limited to 9 dwellings, or about 4.3 units per acre. This is below the density of 6 units per acre, which is otherwise permitted by the Land Development Ordinance for transitional residential. In addition to those conditions, development of the site will be held to additional requirements of the LDO, including a 50-foot Type A streetscape along the Piney Plains Road frontage, and Type A standard is Cary's densest planting rate. Perimeter buffers along the other sides of the property will depend on the housing types that are ultimately proposed for the site. A 40-foot Type A buffer will be required along the southern and western property lines if the site were to be developed with any townhouses, and half of a 20-foot Type B buffer would be planted along the northern property line abutting the existing townhouse development. If developed as detached dwellings less than 8,000 square feet, a 30-foot Type B buffer, represented by the green dashed line, would apply along the southern and western property lines, and half of a 30-foot Type A along the northern property line. Within these streetscapes and perimeter buffers, there are typically limitations on vegetation disturbance, confining impacts to areas needed for road improvements, pedestrian networks, and utility crossings. In this case, the streetscape area and portions of some of the buffer areas on this property are already lacking vegetation because it is currently a single-family residential lot, and thus they would be replanted or supplemented to the correct planting standard. Development of the site would also follow LDO requirements to prioritize preservation of any champion trees identified at the time of development plan review. If preservation of champion trees is infeasible, then replacement of caliper inches would be required. And finally, the site would be required to provide at least 600 square feet of community gathering space. An analysis of this request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies in the Live, Work, and Shape chapters apply most directly. The proposal would provide additional housing choices as it would increase the stock of townhouses or smaller lot residential detached dwellings, which are somewhat unique in the immediate area. A greater variety in housing types also supports the growth of a more diverse workforce, and the site's location near a major thoroughfare would enable easy access to major employment centers throughout the area. And finally, the proposed uses would provide an appropriate use transition to the variety of residential lot sizes and zoning districts that surround the site. The Future Growth Framework Map designates the site as being a traditional neighborhood. These areas call for a moderate housing mix, and transitional residential is identified as an appropriate residential zone for this area. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held last September, and 6 citizens participated. Several questions regarded the private Mullinger Street located in the townhouse development to the north of 2500 Piney Plains Road, known as Piney Place, and this road is proposed to be extended into the site. Citizens inquired about how Mullinger Street will transition from private in the existing townhouse development to public into the new site of the rezoning, and whether the existing portion of Mullinger Street can be converted to public. There were also concerns about buffers, environmental impacts, drainage, utility extensions, and the proposed design and quality of the homes in regards to size and price point. Staff received 2 emails about this request after the neighborhood meeting, both of which had questions about Mullinger Street and the possible extension within the development. A public hearing was held at the December 14th council meeting. There was 1 speaker and no written comments. Comments from the speaker included concerns with increased traffic and parking in the Piney Place townhouse complex, as well as comments about the potential risks to safety and property due to the construction. The speaker also expressed concerns about environmental impacts. This was then followed by several questions from council. Council first requested the dimensions of public versus private townhome streets. Council then asked about the Legacy Private Streets program offered by Cary's Transportation Department, and if the portion of Mullinger Street and the Piney Place development would qualify for conversion to public under that program. And then finally, council followed up with a question about whether or not sidewalks would be constructed on Mullinger Street if it was successfully converted to public. Staff told council that they would follow up with the Transportation Department to ensure that they had the best information about the dimensions of public and private townhome streets. They would also inquire about the status of the Legacy Streets program and the possible conversion of Mullinger Street to public. So this diagram illustrates how Mullinger Street would be extended from the Piney Place townhome development into the site of the rezoning. Townhome developments today are required to have public streets meeting Cary's LDO dimensional standards, but the rezoning and development plan for the Piney Place neighborhood were approved prior to this requirement taking effect. If the existing portion of Mullinger Street will not be converted to public, there will be an end town maintenance sign installed on the property line as one enters the existing section of Mullinger Street from 2500 Piney Plains. Staff conducted research after the public hearing to confirm some of the information about Townhome Street dimensional standards, including Mullinger's specific dimensions, and the current status of the Legacy Streets program. This information was published in the January 12th Council Weekly Report. Staff confirmed that public townhome streets are either 40 or 45 feet, depending on whether sidewalks are on one or both sides of the street. Private streets, meanwhile, have no specified width and vary across developments. Mullinger Street in particular is 37 feet wide, which is up to 8 feet narrower than public townhome standards. Staff then inquired with the Transportation Department if the Legacy Streets program is still active and if Mullinger is eligible for conversion. Staff confirmed that the program is active and that they have been in contact with members of the Piney Place HOA. However, more research and coordination with residents will be required to determine the next steps for that possible conversion process. Finally, it was confirmed that Mullinger Street already features sidewalks on one or both sides of the street throughout the Piney Place development, and so if the conversion process were to be initiated, staff would likely seek to accept the street without any further improvements to the road. Since the public hearing, there have been no changes to the conditions offered by the applicant. Staff's preliminary recommendation is for consistency with the Imagine Cary community plan. We found that the request is supported by a number of policies in the Live and Work chapters, as the proposal provides for small lot housing types less common in the immediate area, and the housing types permitted could make reasonable use or form transitions to the variety of residential lot sizes and zones in the area. Finally, as mentioned before, the site currently has very sparse vegetation in the streetscapes and buffers, as it is a single-family residential lot. The replanting of the streetscape and buffers to the LDO standard would increase the number of plantings in the area, addressing one of the Serve chapter policies. This concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative is here to provide comments, and then I'm available for further questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Or perhaps not.
So do we have anyone representing this request from an applicant standpoint? Yes? No? No? Okay, then we do not.
Okay, then we do not.
In that case, now's the time for board members to ask questions of the staff, since we do not have an applicant. And Ken, can we start with you if you have any questions?
Yes. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. If it does not become a public street, if Mullinger does not become a public street, how will Cary, or how does Cary plan to address like snow removal in the new development?
Thank you. So Cary's policy is to only provide services to public streets, but further investigation would be done at the time of the development plan review for this specific case.
Well, but if the only way to get to the public street is through the private street, that's what my question is. Does Cary have other places that we do this, that we clean streets, that there's only an access through a private street to a public street?
If I can just add to that, and maybe this is a question for Priyatham. If this is a private street, can this development be designed such that the only access is Mullinger, or will they have to have their own entrance on Piney Plains?
Priyatham Ganda from Transportation. If by the time this development comes in for development plan, if the streets are not converted to public, then we can consider a separate access for this development on Piney Plains Road. Our preference is to have access to these 9 homes through Mullinger, if at all possible, using the existing access point.
Right.
But alternatively, we can consider a separate access. That way, they can be served by a public street.
So you're saying that that one way or the other will be public, whether it's Mullinger becoming named public or whether you have to have another exit out onto the Piney Plains Road.
That is correct, yes.
So there's not an option for a public street to be behind a private street in this case.
Will bring into question some of the services that we can provide. So that's why we have an alternative option.
But there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then will there also, just to understand the can you get the drawing that had the, maybe it was like page 5 or something, that had the street or where the street would be coming in? Maybe it was faster that then. It was a closer up one. There we go. That's the one I was looking for, 19. This is going to stub, this will stub to the lots to the south, is that correct?
Yes.
And that'll continue to be where it's stubbed. If this section, as we know, these are kind of falling like dominoes, if it continues to fall like this, or there's more down to the south, maybe even over to Pink Acres Street, will the town require access or a stub to Pink Acres Street if all those lots on both sides, like the ones that are to the west of Pink Acres and those that are to the east of Piney Plains go? Or I said that backwards. East of Pink Acres and Pink Acres and west of Piney Plains.
Yes, there'll be a stub requirement towards the west.
Both ways, both to go to Pink Acres and to the Mullinger, whatever that is.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all I had.
So I guess from a determination standpoint, twofold, if Mullingar, I guess I understand, so this affects the access on Piney Plains, there are already concerns about traffic, having access directly out, is there access point, I mean, you're getting at the Pink Acres as well, but they're not directly to that. I'm just trying to understand, is there any requirement that is there a requirement that there has to be public services provided, or are these potentially not going to have public services ultimately when the final decision is made, given that we don't know the plan at this point?
Do you mean to the new development?
To the new development?
Services would be provided.
They will be
because they are
provided.
required to
Okay.
be public streets.
Okay. Is there any, I know there was a maximum of 9 dwellings in various, is there any minimum? I don't know if I saw a minimum set. Could another single-family home, in theory, go back in this location?
There is no minimum for TRCU,
Okay.
or for transitional residential,
Gotcha.
rather.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I didn't look at the question. So if there were traffic concerns or construction traffic concerns on Mullingar, but there's currently a driveway out to Piney Plains from the single-family dwelling, I know that when off 54 near Cary Parkway, when the development was being done that runs between Morrisville and Cary on that corner, they specifically used a different road rather than the streets until it was complete, and then they went. Is that an option, or that we determine in development review, or is it up to the applicant to decide to put their construction vehicles in and out on the driveway of the existing house, for instance, as opposed to driving down a neighborhood? Or is that would that have to be a condition?
That's a great question. I think I'll call on Priyatham again to
Okay.
answer that.
Okay.
You might as well just stay really close. I think this is going to be all about you.
Generally, those decisions are made at development plan, and if needed, we can require a construction access off
Okay.
of Piney Plains.
Okay.
That becomes a concern.
You can do that.
We can
Okay,
do that.
that's great.
At the same time, a condition is also helpful sometimes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No questions.
No questions.
Mike?
I think that covered my questions.
Again, on Mulligar, sorry. What is I heard you say 37 feet is what they've got out there, and that's the right-of-way width. Is the road width back to back where they with the travelway? How does it compare between public and private?
So I can speak, if you want to chime in. The roadway width for both Mullinger, which is, as we know, is private, and the public is both 27 feet.
Okay. And then, do they also have the same pavement thickness if it was subjected to solid waste and recycling trucks moving forward? Is that going to be a problem?
They don't. If you want to provide more information, yeah, generally private streets are not built to the same standard, and Pritham can provide more detail.
Yeah, just as right, when the private streets were built, those are based on the geotech report at the time of development plan, whereas all public streets now have more robust minimum standards.
Okay. So basically, town would be taking over a road that might be a little bit under on the pavement thickness.
As part of the Legacy Streets program, that is something that we check, and most of the times they should be okay, but that's something our colleagues will check.
Okay. And then just wanted to verify that this public versus private, based on what I've heard, if I've heard it correctly, this isn't because of the developer, it's more a change in policy.
That is my
So
understanding.
you're not allowed to have private streets anymore for townhomes, for new projects.
That is correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
John?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Sal?
Some questions as it relates to how townhouses and maybe, kind of the definition or what the ordinance, allows. On the townhouse, are they required to be deeded individually, or could they be a condominium type ownership?
Yes, I think I'll call on my colleague Katie.
Yes, so for townhouses, they would actually have to be platted and sold as individual lots. The
Okay.
units would just be attached. So it wouldn't be like a condominium type setup.
Okay, and while you're here, so is there rules on how many can be clustered? So could these be duplexes? And then the other question I have is owner versus for rent versus for sale. Is there any, are we, as a town, dictating that, or?
Yeah, so the developer could do 2 units,
Okay.
attached, and that would still meet the townhouse definition. So
okay.
that could be a possibility. And then when it comes to ownership versus rental, regulate as a town or a municipal jurisdiction. So whether or not they're selling them or they're renting them, that's not something that we could enter into with zoning, but they would have to be platted as individual lots.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if the applicant was here, we could ask them that, right? Okay,
Anything else? Good.
that's it, thank you.
If you look at this development, I mean, I think obviously you can see where everybody's questions are as it really relates to the street. So I know this doesn't require a traffic study. I know it's too small, but all the comments that we've already heard on Mullingar Street, you're looking at what, 18, maybe 20 more cars? If there's nine townhomes, 2 cars per townhome, maybe. And it sounds like the street is possibly not built to withstand a lot of wear and tear. Maybe it's a little bit narrower. Is that anything that the town gets involved in, concerned about? It just seems like it's just not really, nobody really thought that there was going to be another development connected to this when it was originally put in.
Well, I can't speak to what they considered for the future of the
Well,
surrounding
it would be more like,
developments.
what do you consider? I mean, what would you guys require when this street, I mean, the existing street, I guess, is what it is, and really nothing can be done about that. And that is really part of my concern, is the existing street, if it becomes something the town's gonna own, would you bring it up to a code? Or would you just, it is what it is, and you would build the extension properly, if you will? You know, you're going to have two different standards, I guess, at the end of the day. And that's really just the way it's going to be?
It sounds like as a part of the legacy program, they do try to accept streets without further improvements, especially considering this has, the existing portion of Mullinger has what they are looking for, this presence of sidewalks.
Would that be later, the town would have to come in and the town would have to pay to upgrade this street, or how would that work?
If you don't mind, let me answer your first question in terms of the street widths. The lane width on the private street is still 11-foot lanes, 11 feet in each direction. That is consistent with the public street that we have today. So in terms of lane width and capacity, no issues there. In terms of pavement sections, when our staff goes in and inspects the existing streets, which are not too old, they will make a determination on whether these meet or anywhere close to current standards. And if there are any repairs, that is something staff could ask the neighborhood to bring it up to the current standards. So that's a part of the coordination that has yet to be done.
Gotcha.
On the surface, this seems to be a good candidate for consideration.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Yep, go ahead.
Just for some background context, was there a specific reason with the new program of not allowing private streets for townhomes? Was there a specific reason why that was pushed forward by the town? I assume there was.
Yeah, I can think of one or two reasons. One that comes to mind is being able to provide services to townhomes that are along private streets, especially during snow, wintry conditions, that we're not able to provide them services, and concerns rose from that, and I think that's one of the reasons. I'm sure there are a couple other reasons too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I do know that the number one reason to drive it was the calls that the council members would get when the snow wasn't cleared, and they had to say, we can't clear it. And I think that led to, let's just do away with private streets, because if the width of the street's the same, just build it to the right standard, and then it's not an issue. And I know that happened while I was on council, so it absolutely, that was the reasoning.
Other services are not available there as well, right? Or is garbage available on Mullingar Street today?
One member of Public Works staff informed me today that they do believe garbage is being provided to the private development, and that is an exception that is not generally provided to most private developments.
Right, because I live in a neighborhood with a number of private streets, and I pay inordinately more for those few streets, and so I'm a little bit sensitive to the issue. But the other thing is, if it decided that it was not up to standard, and the council wanted to make, ultimately, it's just kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it can be private, and ultimately, if it comes down to the street's not acceptable, it has to be 40 feet, or we grandfather it, but it would ultimately be the town's responsibility if they decided. Can you force them to bring it up to speed if they don't have the capacity or the funds? It's kind of what I was trying to understand, that piece of the equation.
Yeah, to be honest, we don't know all the answers yet, because that's why it is still a pilot program. Some neighborhoods may need upgrades for ADA ramps, some may need sidewalk repairs, curb and gutter repairs. We don't know exactly what's needed here,
Okay,
if anything, yeah.
understood.
And just to be clear, to make sure all the board members are clear, the new development that we're here tonight deciding on, it definitely will or will maybe have its own entrance, or is that completely ruled out? Is that still? I just want to make sure I really understand that.
It may have. It really is going to depend on the layout of this project, and also the status of Mullinger Street and the two other streets in the existing townhome community, whether they would become public streets or whether they're still in process. There are a couple of factors that would have to fall in place, yeah.
It's just, that's a kind of a game changer for this. If it has its own, it kind of puts a lot of this away, but it also reduces the amount of development area that they would have.
That is correct. In terms of access management, Piney Plains Road is an NCDOT maintained roadway. And for 9 units, a separate access is not warranted from capacity perspective.
Gotcha, okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing that there's no other questions, would someone like to make a motion for 23 RZ 11, 2500 Piney Plains zone rezoning? I believe you have a printout, well, and you have it on the screen.
I move that the board find 23 REZ 11 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by Planning and Zoning Board.
Would someone like to second?
Second.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead, since you made the motion, comment.
Yeah, I found that the plan was consistent with the Cary plan, which is the document that we're all working with. I understand that there are a number of concerns about Mullinger Street. However, the project is going to go through a development plan. It's going to go through council. It sounds like there are ways to work through some of those things. Ultimately, we're looking at the live, work, shape, and serve chapters and of the Cary plan, and I found it consistent.
Perfect. Any comments, Sean?
No, concur with what Mike said.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make before we have a vote? No? In that case, all those in favor of the motion that's been put forward, please state aye.
Aye.
Are there any against? That carries unanimously. That is the only business we have for this evening. We do not have any new business, and therefore we can now stand adjourned. Thank you for coming tonight.